What if I told you that one of Hollywood's biggest stars was literally blackmailed into wearing a cat costume, and that this single decision would destroy careers, traumatize children, and kill an entire genre of movies forever? The Cat in the Hat wasn't just a bad movie, it was a hostage situation disguised as family entertainment, where the star held everyone captive while the cameras rolled. This is the untold story of how Hollywood's golden boy became its biggest nightmare. Picture this, it's the early 2000s, and studios are throwing money at anything with childhood nostalgia, fresh off Jim Carrey's surprising success, turning The Grinch into a $345 million monster. Universal Studios was practically salivating over their next Dr. Seuss goldmine. The Cat in the Hat seemed like a slam dunk, beloved character, proven formula, and they had their sights set on comedy royalty to bring it to life. Tim Allen was originally supposed to don the red and white striped hat. He was interested, did the prep work, but scheduling conflicts with other projects forced him to walk away. That's when Mike Myers' name surfaced, and on paper, it looked brilliant. This was the guy who'd given us Wayne's World, Austin Powers, and was voicing Shrek. He specialized in larger-than-life characters with cartoon physics. What could go wrong? Everything. Absolutely everything. But here's where the story gets twisted. Myers didn't choose the Cat in the Hat. He was forced into it through what can only be described as Hollywood blackmail. In the late 90s, Myers had been developing a movie based on his Saturday Night Live character Dieter from Sprockets. Universal had already invested $3.8 million in pre-production when Myers decided the script wasn't working and backed out. The studio wasn't having it. They slapped him with a $3.8 million lawsuit, followed by Imagine Entertainment piling on with a $30 million suit. Myers fought back, but when the dust settled, he'd made a deal with the devil. As part of the settlement, Myers agreed to star in another Universal film. That film? The Cat in the Hat. Imagine being contractually obligated to play a beloved children's character when you'd rather be anywhere else. The resentment was immediate and toxic. According to co-star Amy Hill, Myers made the entire production horrible and nightmarish. He treated the set like his personal kingdom and everyone else like unwelcome peasants. Myers would show up late, disappear into hair and makeup for hours while cast and crew waited, and refused to speak to anyone except his handlers and the director. Think about that level of diva behavior. Professional actors who'd been in the business for decades were suddenly being treated like they didn't exist. He had his area cordoned off with tenting because he didn't want anyone seeing him. It was like working with a celebrity ghost. But the most ridiculous detail? Myers employed a dedicated assistant whose only job was to hold a Tupperware container of chocolates and feed them to him on demand. This chocolate guy got more attention and conversation than his actual co-stars. The absurdity would be funny if it wasn't so cruel to everyone trying to do their jobs. The production itself was a fever dream of poor decisions. Director Bo Welch was making his directorial debut, coming from a background as a production designer on films like Beetlejuice and Edward Scissorhands. His visual eye was undeniable, but managing a hostile star while trying to bring Dr. Seuss to life proved overwhelming. Myers would micromanage everything, demanding multiple takes and challenging the writers constantly, while Welch felt powerless to push back. The movie's tone became schizophrenic. Myers kept injecting adult humor and crude jokes into what should have been innocent family entertainment. He was used to the improvisation-heavy environment of Austin Powers, where nearly 40% of the dialogue was made up on the spot, but Dr. Seuss isn't Austin Powers, and the result felt like watching a children's book get violated in real time. The sets were another nightmare. Rather than filming in real locations, they built an entire artificial neighborhood where everything was painted in oversaturated colors. Every surface was fake, from the grass to the trees, creating a surreal environment that required constant maintenance and touch-ups. Any damage meant delays and repainting, burning through money and time. The interior sets were cramped and claustrophobic, with bright studio lights creating a hot, miserable working environment. Myers, buried under layers of fur and prosthetics, was constantly overheating and irritated. He'd have to reset his costume during takes, interrupting the flow and frustrating everyone. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The star making everyone's life hell was himself trapped in a furry prison of his own making. When The Cat in the Hat finally hit theaters on November 21st, 2003, the response was swift and brutal. Critics didn't just dislike it, they were personally offended by it. The film earned a devastating 10% on Rotten Tomatoes, with reviewers using words like repulsive, ugly, and an insult. Rolling Stone called it bloated, vulgar, and exploitative, comparing the visual design to what you puke up after gorging on cotton candy and sour apple martinis. Audiences were equally horrified. Parents who'd brought their children for wholesome Dr. Seuss entertainment instead witnessed something that felt more like a fever dream. The movie made money, $133 million worldwide, but that was barely half of what The Grinch had earned, and the cultural damage was irreversible. But the most devastating reaction came from someone whose opinion mattered most. Dr. Seuss's widow, Audrey Geisel. She hated the movie so much that she immediately banned any future live-action adaptations of her husband's work. This wasn't just a business decision, it was a protective measure. She'd watched Myers and Universal turn her husband's gentle, whimsical creation into something unrecognizable and disturbing. That ban remains in effect to this day. Every Dr. Seuss adaptation since The Lorax, Horton Hears a Who, The Grinch remake, has been animated. The Cat in the Hat didn't just fail, it murdered an entire category of filmmaking. Myers' career never recovered. His next major project, The Love Guru in 2008, was an even bigger disaster, and he essentially vanished from leading roles afterward. The man who'd once been one of comedy's biggest stars became known as difficult to work with, a reputation that followed him for years. Looking back, The Cat in the Hat serves as a cautionary tale about what happens when corporate contracts override creative passion. You can't force someone to care about a project, and you definitely can't force them to be professional about it. Myers was trapped in a role he didn't want, making a movie he didn't believe in, and everyone, cast, crew, audiences, and even the memory of Dr. Seuss himself, paid the price. The tragedy is that buried beneath all the dysfunction, there were glimpses of what could have been. Welch's production design, when it wasn't being undermined by poor execution, showed real imagination. The young cast, including Dakota Fanning and Spencer Breslin, gave committed performances despite the chaos around them. And somewhere in Myers' DNA was the comedic talent that had made millions laugh. But talent without professionalism is just wasted potential. The Cat in the Hat stands as one of Hollywood's most expensive reminders that sometimes the biggest disasters come not from lack of resources or vision, but from the simple failure to treat other people with basic human decency. Maybe the real lesson isn't about bad movies or failed adaptations. Maybe it's simpler. When you're contractually obligated to wear a cat costume, at least try not to make everyone else's life miserable while you're doing it, because in the end, that behavior becomes the lasting legacy, more memorable than any box office numbers or critical scores. The Cat in the Hat was supposed to be a children's movie. Instead, it became a masterclass in how not to make one, taught by someone who clearly didn't want to be there. And now, thanks to one widow's protective instincts, it's the last of its kind, a final cautionary meow from Hollywood's most cursed cat.